Starwalker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, a podcast all about tabletop role-playing games from the perspective of the captain's chair. Greetings, gamer, and welcome to Game Master's Journey, a podcast all about tabletop role-playing games from the perspective of the captain's chair. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. DeFoggi and Nick Johnson join me on the show today to discuss the 13th Age role-playing game. This is the second of a two-part interview. So join me on the journey. Together, we can become game masters truly worthy of the title. Hello, listener and fellow GM and or player. Welcome to episode 15 of Game Master's Journey. I'm Lex Starwalker, and I'm transmitting this message from the Obsidian Monolith somewhere outside of time and space. Today, I'll continue my interview with JM and Nick from the Iconic Podcast. We'll be discussing all things 13th Age. Before I get to that, I want to just take a quick minute to thank the patrons of the show. I really appreciate the support of my patrons, and you can learn more about becoming a patron of the show at patreon.com/Game Master's Journey. Starwalker Studios and all the podcasts we produce rely on the support of our patrons to keep going. So go check that out, and I really appreciate any support that you can give us. In addition to making these audio podcasts, which are in your ear holes right now, I'm also streaming D&D and Numenera games on Twitch. You can find me at twitch.tv/Starwalker Studios. I also hope in the near future to start streaming some Star Wars Edge of the Empire. So more on that in the future, hopefully. You can also find all my actual play videos on YouTube at youtube.com/C/Starwalker Studios, and you can find links to all this stuff on the website at starwalkerstudios.com. And I am also going to be live streaming all of my podcasts in the future, and you can watch those at starwalkerstudios.com/live. And not only can you watch me podcast live and watch all the screw-ups I make that you never know about in the audio version because I edit, but you can also participate in a chat room where you can talk with me and other people who are listening and have fun and commune with other nerds. What's better than that? So definitely check that out, and definitely follow me on Google+. Just look for Lex Starwalker so that you can be up to date on when I am streaming something live, whether it's a podcast or a role-playing game. And who knows, in the future I might actually stream some video games too. I don't know. I'm pretty terrible at video games, so I don't know if someone wants to watch someone who's terrible at video games play them. Maybe. I don't know. You tell me. All right, so this is part 2 of the 13th Age interview with JM and Nick, and we continue talking about 13th Age and what makes it unique and awesome. One thing I'm curious about is the setting for the game. I believe there's at least 2 published settings that you can play in. Is that correct?
The core setting is the Dragon Empire. It comes with the main rulebook, and it's kind of a generic fantasy, Forgotten Realms style kitchen sink world.
Okay.
But it's a lot more like Numenera, where here are some spikes that we've set into the map. So like these cities are established and, the seas are established, but do whatever you want. I mean, even to the point where the dungeons and hellholes, which is where the abyss breaks into the world, it's like the monoliths on the Numenera map. There are some that are marked and some that are just free for you to use.
Okay, cool.
But there are a lot of settings now. The other published one is Dragon Kings is out for 13th Age, which is Tim Brown from Dark Sun days at TSR.
I was going to say, that sounds like Dark Sun.
Yeah. It is. It's his homage to Dark Sun, and it's got a 13th age supplement for it and a rock opera that you can buy with it that's actually pretty incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah, if you like Rush, check out the Dragon Kings album.
Cool. I love Rush. You said rock opera. I was like, is that like Klingon opera?
No. No, he, just on a side tangent, he loved 2112 and the concept album behind that. And so he was like, want to do a 2112 if it came with like the stats for the, the priests of Syrinx and all of the spaceships and the world. But he did it as a spiritual successor to Dragon Kings. So
awesome.
13th Age Glorantha is coming out soon. It kickstarted successfully, which is Greg Stafford's mythic world. That's one of the oldest RPG settings.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I listened to your guys' episode about that. That sounds really cool.
Oh man, I'm so excited for that. I actually wrote down all of the ones that are coming out. Do you want me to share those, or?
Sure, yeah.
I don't want to give too much information.
Settings are awesome.
Okay. Midgard by Kobold Press, who are the same guys who did the Tyranny of Dragons adventure. And they actually have other books from the Midgard line that they're translating from from Pathfinder to 13th Age. And then Carthoon is coming out, which is it's the setting from a webcomic, D20 Monkey. It's their D&D setting.
Okay.
That's coming out. It looks like it's going to be very epic high fantasy, like the gods involved with the world and lots of dangers.
Cool.
And Primeval Thule is a Conan meets Cthulhu version of 13th Age.
Nice. That actually sounds like a really cool combination. At first I was like, what? And then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, it is very bizarre. It's very focused. It's not as kitchen sinky as some of the other 13th Age settings. It is, there are no orcs, there are no elves. It is very humanocentric. Okay. Like you would find in Howard or other pulp stories. But I think their books are going to be hitting stores soon as well.
Very cool. Yeah, I love settings because you can always take a setting from one game and use it in another if you want. They're great. All right, so we've talked about kind of some of the things that make 13th Age unique. So I know that you guys are big fans of the game. So what is it about the game that you like compared to other fantasy games?
I think for me, it goes back to the open format of telling a great story. I like being able to just jump in and already being very skilled at whatever class or race it is that I'm playing. Because I haven't been playing RPGs for that long, I've never been in a campaign that's lasted more than like 2 or 3 months. So I've never experienced being able to take a character from the farmer who picks up his father's sword all the way up to an epic fighter. So I like being able to just jump in and be an epic fighter. And at the same time, because I love the story side of things much more than the mechanic side of things, the flexibility and open-endedness of that, to be able to just role play and make stuff up and have it fly, I love it.
Awesome.
For me, it's everything that Nick said, but from the GM side of the screen. For a D20 game, and I'm not normally, if I had my druthers, I would play as much D20 as I do, but so many people that I game with really like the D20 class race mechanic package.
Okay.
Of the D20 games, it is by far for me the simplest and most narrative to run. Making encounters is as simple as it was in 4th edition. It's not XP budget based or challenge ranking based or anything like that.
Very cool. So let's say I or a listener want to jump in the 13th Age. What kind of products are out there, and what do you need to get to start playing, to start running the game? Like, what do you need?
Well, if you just want core mechanics and you don't really care so much for the flavor, you just want to understand how 13th Age works, they have a free SRD available on their website, and that's set in, I think they call the Archmage engine setting, but it's just a very basic plain PDF or Word document that you can download that has all the stat blocks, but it doesn't have all of the flavor text or anything like that. So, I mean, you could start out by trying it without having to spend a penny. But at the very least, if you wanted to actually get into the Dragon Empire setting or flesh out a little bit more of the details and imagery and that sort of thing. Really, all you need is the core book, which I think you probably pick it up for about $30 on Amazon right now.
Okay. Cool.
And I would supplement that with if you go to Pelgrane's website, you can sign up for their Tales of the 13th Age, which is their organized play, and there's 12-ish adventures right now that you can download, and most of them are designed to be played in order. So with the main rule book and the 12 free adventures, you're good to go.
That's awesome.
And beyond that, they have 13 True Ways is an expansion of the core book that introduces a lot more playable classes and I think a couple more races. It talks about multi-classing and fleshes out a little bit of that type of stuff. There's a bestiary. There's a new campaign book that's hitting the presses right now called Eyes of the Stone Thief, which will take you from level 4 to level 8, which is a fantastic mega dungeon that's living and moving and chasing you down.
Yeah.
Cool.
The original premise was Moby Dick, the Moby Dick of dungeons. Your players will come to hate it as it haunts you.
Nice.
13 True Ways also has a little bit more of the Dragon Empire. They've got one adventure out for low levels that you can purchase called Shadows of Eldalon, and they have a Book of Loot, which is just magic items. And I have to say, the highest praise I can give to the Book of Loot is on the way back from Gen Con. That was Kansas for us. We were reading the Book of Loot out loud to each other, my wife and my buddy and I, and it made Kansas bearable.
That should be their tagline. Book of Loot makes Kansas bearable.
And then from Kobold Press, the Archmage engine is a lot like the OGL, the Open Gaming License.
Okay.
You just have to put some legal text at the back and you can publish for it. So there's a Midgard bestiary, and then my favorite supplement for 13th Age right now is Deep Magic. It's 553 new spells, but also the way for fighters to give up some talents and be a fighter mage. You pick 10 spells, and that's the school you studied under. And
cool.
But yeah, other than that, if you're looking for more information or resources, there's a very active, very friendly community on Google+. There's also a 13th Age forum that people are constantly posting, new builds or stat blocks or features for this class or that class or setting ideas. And there's a lot of stuff being actively developed from the community. And for the most part, they're making it publicly available, which is great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, Vault of the 13th Age, it's the website that has places where people can put up new classes or new powers, new feats or icons.
Okay.
Just kind of a general repository of all things 13th Age fan created.
Very cool. I definitely see the similarities to Numenera in games like that, more story focused. I'm curious, so you said that there's 10 levels compared to like say D&D, like how quickly does your character level? Is it basically like playing level 10 to 20 D&D, or do you level more quickly or more slowly, or?
It is less. There's no experience points in 13th Age.
Okay.
And so every 4 encounters, you gain a full rest. So GMs are advised to kind of plan 4 encounters per grouping, if you will.
Okay.
And then every 4 full rests, you earn an advancement, which is you get 1 piece of the next level now.
Okay.
So you may get a new. You could say, oh, I want the hit points for my next level, or I want the stat increase if it's one of those, or a new feat. But because it's strictly combat based, which if you think about it, all D20 experience points are generally handed out combat wise.
Right.
You can actually stretch the game out quite a bit if you're not running as much combat. But you still have these incremental advances, so it feels like you are gaining things at a relatively standard pace.
That's very similar to the Cypher system, where you're getting your tiers a piece at a time.
Yeah.
And you get to choose which order you get those, right?
Mm-hmm. And then after you get your 3rd one, the next one you're going to get everything from the new level.
Very cool. Yeah, that's I like that kind of thing. That's what I've been doing in my D&D campaign. Is they call it the milestone advancement, where I don't worry about XP and stuff. I'm just like, okay, you guys are 2nd level now.
Yeah.
But it's still very much, you get everything all at once. And that is one thing that I don't like about the the class and level system is it's not very realistic. It's like one day you're a putz and the next day you're much better at like all these different things.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one of the abstractions that I have to just hand wave in my mind.
Yeah.
Oh, if I may go back to one of your earlier questions, there was one other thing that makes 13th Age unique from a GM's perspective that I am wildly a big fan of. So one of the things I did not like about running 3rd edition was the stat blocks for monsters.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, the fact that I could either spend 4 hours prepping my adventure, or I could spend 4 hours looking up all of the different things that this one guy did. And inevitably I would get to the end of a fight and go, if only I had done X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
So monsters in 13th Age they're trimmed down, but the nice thing is all of their abilities key off your natural die roll. So if you're running a dragon, and let me see if I can find a good one. Like the large blue dragon, he's got 2 claw attacks, but if you roll an even, he can make a bite attack as a free action. But it's right there in the stat block, so you're constantly, all you have to do is look at what your triggers are. They're fun to run because you're never quite sure when it's going to happen, but you don't actually have to plan for it happening. And your players are usually surprised when this monster suddenly does something else. They made running monsters a lot of fun in 13th Age.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I think I even like that better than like what Numenera does with the GM Intrusion, where the monster might have some horrible thing it can do as a GM Intrusion, because sometimes you forget those. Or you just don't find like the great opportunity to use that thing, or you don't want to have to decide, which character is going to get swallowed whole and maybe die, Yeah. And it's nice for it just to, when it rolls this happens, And then it reminds you see that number on the die and you're like, oh yeah, it's going to do this thing now.
One of the other ones, there's a monster called the Red Cap.
Yeah.
The fairy monster who dips his hat in the blood of his enemies. He has the best monster ability of any game in the world. You pick a bad word as a GM, and the fluff is anytime a character says or thinks this word, the Red Cap teleports away.
Nice.
Yes, so the way they do the character's thinking is if the players say the word out of character, or if they say the word in character, basically the Red Cap teleports to under the bed or into the character's backpack and then has this surprise attack.
Nice.
So the first time we were playing, we had a character named 19, so that's the word I picked. So anytime they were calling for help, or their die rolls or their hit rolls were 19s, these things were just teleporting all over the battlefield.
That's awesome.
Well, it was really bad that night because all of our dice were hot for 19s. We're always rolling 19s.
Now, do the players know what the word is, or do they have to figure that out?
They have to figure that out.
It took us a while.
That's great. That is hilarious. Yeah, I really like that. I really like, random things happening, and I like that, the GM doesn't have to be the bad guy and say, "Oh, I decided to do this thing to you." It's just like, "Hey, you rolled a 19. What am I going to do?"
Yeah.
That's great. So, I don't know if this is getting too much into mechanics, but we were talking about the backgrounds earlier, and you mentioned that you can put up to 5 points in a background, and I was just curious, like, what that translates to, like what kind of bonus that would translate to in the game.
Well, every roll on a d20 is your attribute plus your level, plus the relevant, if you're rolling to hit, you have your hit bonus.
Okay.
So it's usually the equivalent of about what you would have in 3rd edition D&D of like your starting max 4 points in a skill.
Okay.
The encounter math works out to, if you have a full 5 points in the background, I think you have to roll somewhere between a 10 or a 12 for an easy roll, and then it goes up for there.
Okay, so it's its own kind of mechanic around the background. Yeah. Okay.
And they really, again, for simplifying running the game, you basically, as a GM, decide if this scene is an adventure scene, a champion scene, or an elite scene.
Okay.
And you have your easy, moderate, and difficult target numbers set for that kind of scene. So you're not really trying to figure out, okay, well, this is a +2 and this is how much difficulty it is. It's like, no, this is an adventure scene. It's hard. Here's what most of the difficulties for anything they try and interact with here is.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I just thought of one other thing that I've heard about 13th Age that you guys didn't mention, and that is the escalation die.
Oh, yes.
That sounds fun. Can you tell us about that?
That's a great way to build momentum in combat. It's a D6 that's set in the middle of the table, and the bigger a D6 that you can find, the better. And each round of combat, you increase the escalation die by 1. So the first round of combat, it's a +0, second round +1, third round +2, so on and so forth. And all of the players get to add that number to their rolls. So instead of in addition to adding their level and weapon modifier and all of that, you also get to add this die to it. So the thought behind it is the longer you're in battle, the easier it's going to be to hit the monsters.
Okay.
And so the longer you're in battle, the more likely it is that you're going to win. What's a little bit exciting and frustrating and annoying for a player, and more exciting and just plain exciting for a GM, is that there are certain monsters that also get to key off of that escalation die.
Nice.
Dragons are able to use it. Other monsters can use it if it's even or if it's odd. It's a great way to use an in-game timer that, if you're in a setting, let's say you're on a ship that's sinking and you're doing combat on the ship, well, each time the escalation die goes up, maybe the ship sinks a little bit lower into the water.
Cool.
Certain player classes can also either increase or decrease the escalation die to get a bonus, maybe to trigger everyone gets a free heal or something like that. So there's a little bit of out-of-game strategy that takes place sometimes of, hey guys, do you think we can lower it this time around because we all need a heal, or should we keep it going? But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I think it's another one of those unique things about 13th Age that set it apart, that made combat even that much more fun.
And I like tying very difficult choices in combat to the escalation die. I may, like Nick said, use it like a timer.
Okay.
But say, okay, at round 3, okay, the cultists are going to start summoning this demon. So if you go and deal with them, you're going to reduce the escalation die because you're trying to interrupt you're leaving the flow of the combat. But if you don't, this demon's going to show up. Or give players the option to use natural magic to heal themselves, but because they're not continuing combat, they have to pay the cost of reducing the escalation die.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I like that, and I like the whole, certain things happen on an even roll or an odd roll or on these certain numbers. And I noticed we've been working on a half-elf character for me for the one-shot you're going to do. And I have an ability where I can reduce a roll by 1. And at first I was like, how is that a bonus? That seems like a penalty. But then you explain that, well, sometimes something cool happens on an even number or something. I'm like, oh, okay. That's cool.
Well, and the flip side is sometimes monster abilities trigger off whether you hit or miss them with an even or odd roll.
Oh.
So you could also use that to not trigger a monster effect.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that.
And the GM screen is fairly transparent when it comes to combat too. So if you're wondering, is that attack trigger off of a certain roll, you can ask, and most of the time the GM will tell you. And then there's a certain monster type called a mook, which are usually lower hit point creatures. But if you do more damage, if you take one out but do extra damage, that extra damage gets applied to a different mook. And so you could potentially, you hit 1, and because you rolled so high in your damage, you may actually knock out 3 or 4 of them. And that's another monster type that the GM is usually good about announcing in advance. Yes, this is a mook. No, this is not a mook. That sort of thing.
Okay.
And just personally, that's one other thing that I appreciate about 13th Age is that GM screen is, like I said, fairly transparent.
Yeah. There's no risk of you preparing for a fire dragon and find out that the guy's immune to fire. The GM's going to say, hey, here's his vulnerabilities. Okay, you hit. This guy's weak against this, that kind of thing.
So your characters are very, very capable in this game.
Yes.
No level 1 wizards with 2 hit points.
Yeah.
Very cool. that's all the questions that I could come up with. Is there anything else either you guys want to mention or bring up about the game? Did we cover it?
I think we covered in nice detail.
Awesome.
Yeah, I will just say that if you're interested in running it, Jay mentioned earlier that there's a lot of free great adventures, Tales of the 13th Age, their organized play setup. And if you sign up for that and you run one of those games at your local store or whatever, we are currently having a contest where you just tell us about it and you get a chance of winning some gift cards to Pelgrane Press's website.
Awesome. Yes. Very cool. Sounds great. I love that they have all those free adventures and the SRD. That's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing. I think I guess it'll be before this episode, but I've already recorded it, but I haven't released it yet. But I did an episode where I talked about the new D&D, and that's one thing they did that I liked as well, is you can get a lot of the stuff for free, and you can get the adventure they put out. You can actually run that with all the free stuff, so you can just buy that book and you don't have to buy anything else.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think that was a good move, because I think that's one of the issues with like D&D is, well, there's 3 books that you need to play it, and that's a lot of money. So I'm glad that they kind of moved away from that so that people can kind of get hooked on the game without having to spend $100 first. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say too that even when we started the podcast, I was really just relying on the SRD for all of the information and my at table play. But it wasn't too long before I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to lay down some money for this stuff just because it's that good.
Right. Yeah, I really wish Numenera had an SRD, because I think a good game kind of sells itself, and I don't think as a publisher you're really risking much by making basic rules available. I think you're going to get new players and new customers that way.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to do a little bit of that with the Cypher system release.
Yeah, that would be great. Because it's rough as a GM when you have new players and you're like, yeah, sorry, there's no SRD. I have to copy paste stuff in the chat for you. Well, awesome, guys. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Do you want to share like any Twitter information or give us the website for your podcast, things like that?
Sure. I'm fairly active on Google+. Just search the 13th Age forums or search for Nick Johnson. I think it's plus Nick Johnson 858 is my actual URL. Our website is iconicpodcast.com. We put a new episode up about every week. Standard episodes that are 13th Age specific every other week, and then the in-between weeks we talk about other stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I can be found on Google Plus as well, and I have a blog, originsofAdarkgod.wordpress.com, but because of this Shadowcraft stuff, I have been lax in posting to it, but I'm hoping to get back to that.
That happens. Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, guys, and maybe I can have you back on after I've played 13th Age, and we can talk about it again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Would love to do it.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up the 15th episode of Game Master's Journey. Thanks again so much to JM and Nick for taking the time to talk with me. I really appreciate it. I really feel like I've learned a lot about 13th Age from this interview, and I hope that you have too, dear listener. Again, please visit the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com, where you can find a lot of links about things that we talked about, everything from 13th Age resources to how you can find JM and Nick online, and also where you can find their podcast, Iconic Podcast, which is a great podcast for 13th Age or any role-playing games, kind of like this one. It's multi-dimensional, like this one. If you would like to reach me, you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can find me on Google+. Just look for Lex Starwalker, and you can follow me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker. Please visit the website, starwalkerstudios.com, where you can find the show notes that I just mentioned, and you can also find links to our Patreon page if you'd like to become a patron. You can find a donate button if you'd like to make a one-time donation to the studio, and you can find a link to our Google Plus community page, which is a great place to connect with other gamers and nerds and GMs and shoot ideas back and forth and techniques and tricks of the trade, and just enjoy the company of your fellow nerds. If you enjoy Game Master's Journey and you enjoy the podcast that Starwalker Studios puts out, please consider supporting the show and the studio, again, by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Game Master's Journey. You can also try a trial of Audible books with a free trial courtesy of Game Master's Journey. You can find links and information about that in the show notes. And also, if you do any shopping at Amazon, please use one of our Amazon referral links before going to Amazon and help support the studio. I have the 13th Age core book linked in these show notes for episode 15, and that will take you to Amazon, and it doesn't matter what you buy, you will help us out, and we'll really appreciate it. Again, we have a variety of podcasts for you at starwalkerstudios.com. Currently, we have the Beer Tasters podcast, which is all about craft beer and home brewing and just enjoying beer in your life. We have the Age of Gaming podcast, which is a podcast about PS4 and PC gaming. And of course, Game Master's Journey. And we have the Star Citizens United podcast, which is devoted to the future hit video game on PC, Star Citizen. So check them out. Once again, I want to thank you so much for listening to Game Master's Journey and supporting the studio. I really appreciate it. I am Lex Starwalker. Game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey.